You're very welcome and deserving. Have a wonderful show.
Thank you. So welcome, everybody, to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio. Today is Thursday, July the 6th, 2023, and our call-in number is 563-999-3581, and press 1, and that'll put you into queue to talk to us, and we would love to hear your comments and questions, because that makes this your show. And I see Susan's hand's up. I'm not sure if she talked to Dr. Tim or if she's wanting to talk to Michael. So while we're waiting on Michael to dial in, I will turn Susan's microphone on. How are you doing today, young lady?
I'm doing very well. I didn't raise my hand. That was from Dr. Tim, and all I did with Dr. Tim is ask him how you use the computer access to the radio show, and he sent me a link and said within the link is the date of the show. So he showed me what to do, because I have a friend, a German woman in my neighborhood. We've become friends, and she has a daughter who is in Germany and needs to do some work. And I said, would she consider this sort of way to do it? And the woman thought it was a fabulous idea. So she has sent the link. I hope the young woman calls in. I don't even know her name, but she doesn't have a phone. She has a computer. She has a phone, but it's not the kind that she could call in the way we do.
Right.
Yeah. So
yeah, she could even and the instructions are also on the website. If you click on the microphone in the middle of the home page, and it takes you to how you can get into the phone through Blog Talk. You can actually, she could, if she couldn't dial in and talk like through Skype or something, she could ask questions in the chat room and listen on the computer, and so we could answer that way. So that would be awesome.
Tim told me that too, but he did finally send me a direct link, which I sent to her mother and said, send it right now, because the radio show has just started. And it's 6 o'clock her time in Germany. Her mother said that would be a good time. So I hope she does.
Nice. Yeah, well, that would be good.
Yeah.
And Michael has joined us. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome. Hey, young lady, and we're talking about someone in Germany that has an interest in doing some healing work.
There's a woman who runs in the park, and I see her often. And we've gotten to talking about real stuff, thank goodness.
Right.
So she said she's terribly worried about her daughter. Daughter moved here to live with her during the pandemic. She lost a job in Germany. She's 32 years old, and she lived with her parents for a while, but really wanted to go back to a group of friends she had in Germany. But when she got back to Germany, the friends had dispersed, married, paired up, gone out, and she's without a job and she's depressed. And I just thought, boy, radio show. And the mother loved the idea. So I called Dr. Tim to get, because she doesn't have a phone the way we do. She has a phone, but she would have to come in on her computer. So Jeanie was telling me how to get the website and do that.
Right. And also let her know that the book is in German. I don't know if she speaks English well, but if not, the book is on the website free in German as well.
I'll tell her that. She's fluent in English, but, having it in German might be great, because she's originally German, having it in your native tongue.
Yeah, that's actually something that we tell people when they're doing the worksheets, if their native language is some other language. It was actually a German woman that we discovered that with, because she had an issue of being in poverty all the time, and she's actually out of her body now, but we told her, well, the issue started when you were in Germany, and so why don't you do your worksheet in German? And she had a major breakthrough, and actually when she passed away, I would think that she's close to being a millionaire, wouldn't you, Michael?
I think a couple times over.
Yep. Wow.
Yep.
So it made a difference because it was a different vibration. And I'll send you the link for the German book too, direct link.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Excellent. I'll forward it right
cool.
to the
So
mother.
how are things unfolding for you? You've been doing some heavy duty work the last day or two.
Well,
or
you
year
know,
or two.
I have been. All right. Just latest
lifetime
one.
or two.
All right. Things are good, in spite of some insights, which, insights sound awful, but it's such a relief to get them rather than suppress them.
Yes.
So,
I think a really important key, especially when people are unwilling to look at things, is to recognize that anything you embrace in your true nature will always be a benefit, will always be a gift, no matter how horrific the experience might have been. Once it's transformed by the presence of love, actual present love, and that's, of course, one of the skills that needs to be developed to do the work, then everything is a gift. The whole, every aspect of life becomes a gift at that point.
Mm.
And if there's something that doesn't look like it's a gift yet, it's because it hasn't been embraced in love. Yeah, there's an interesting story about a man in the dream in the scriptures, you'll recall, and he's wrestling with an angel, a gift.
Right.
And he's not going to let go till he gets the gift. He stays with it, stays with it, stays with it, stays with it. And that's what needs to happen with these issues that, I can have an inkling of something that I need to deal with. And if I'm eating the sad diet, I smoke pot or, drink alcohol or do my, drugs that shut down vitality, then I might hang out with that issue for decades.
Mm.
And then when I finally decide to shift and go to the next level of vitality, the vitality required to open that aspect of what that gift is, that's when I can open it and receive it. But otherwise, if one stays in resistance, no, I don't want to. Brings to mind a song when we were kids, and the melody line or the main line in it, it's a soldier under General Custer, and the song goes, "Please, Mr. Custer, I don't want to go." In the background, if you remember that song, the refrain is "Forward, ho!" It's like we're going. And he's like, "Please, no." So everything's a gift, ultimately.
Mm.
But if we count on perception, oh man, we can give anything. We can give anything all kinds of horrific attributes.
Yeah.
Because of the horrific things in ourselves we haven't worked through, haven't owned yet.
That is so true. And I don't quite know how to accept what has hit me about all this work is that I aligned myself with my mother against my sister. I became my mother, my power person type mother against my sister. And I have talked to her about the realization of this right now, but I said to my sister, you tell me that you had a terrible time at school and you were bullied a lot for being a crybaby, which of course made you cry more, or, that's using the old language, but she chose to cry more. And I said, but Joe, I wasn't nice to you when we were little. I was very critical of you. I was jealous of you. I wanted to strangle you. Talk about the same words I used the other day.
Yes.
Don't you remember? And she said, we had such good times too, which we did. I used to make up stories and tell her stories, and whenever my parents weren't around, we were friends. But when my mother came around, we were enemies, and it was instantaneous. But I said,
so notice that's a powerful clue. That's a powerful clue. Because what I hear you saying is, remember the 3 levels of behavior related to the power person dynamic. When there's little or no stress, I'll do whatever I did to get along with my power person.
Mm-hmm.
When stress starts to build, I'll do what I did to resist and survive. And when I become ultra stressed, I'll do what my power person did to me that I hated the most. So you just acknowledged that what your power person did to you in the fact that you passed it on to your sister.
Yeah,
and
I did.
what that would imply is that when your parents were around, probably especially mom, then there were all kinds of goals active in your mind, probably in order to stay safe or be accepted or be what people call loved. And so when mom and or dad showed up, those goals were activated, and that's what kicked in the power person dynamic toward your sister. So it would be wise to do worksheets looking at what all those goals might have been with your power person and doing worksheets to get rid of those goals. Because remember that once a goal is set in the mind, there are only 2 ways to move it into an inactive state. One is to achieve it. 2 is to cancel it. And if it's never been canceled, and notice, the goals were there even when mom wasn't there, but they weren't active, and therefore didn't impact your relationship with your sister. But as soon as the power person showed up and all those goals went into resonance, that's when you're stressed. You would overwhelm with stress and move to that behavior. And the very behaviors that you just described are probably the very behaviors you remember detesting from your power person.
Well, I didn't hit my sister. Well, sometimes I did, but I didn't have a riding crop and thrash her. But I disapproved of her. I criticized her outwardly and in my mind. And later in life, she did a couple of things which were really not sisterly, and that's putting it mildly. The first one was when I brought Tim Bingham home to introduce him to the family, my sister got all dressed, flirted like mad with him. She thought she could get him. She could win him for herself, which was very competitive. And then the other thing, which I tell you, Michael, I've been told this by my son, and I have forgotten it, literally forgotten it more than 1 or 2 times. And my daughter, I was telling my daughter about doing this wake-up sheet business and how my fatigue seems to be gone, knock on wood. The other shoe isn't dropping, and I'm very happy about it. But she said, Mom, don't you remember that Joe also molested Jonathan when he was a little boy? She used to babysit, and finally Jonathan would disappear whenever Joe came over. My sister came over. Jonathan would make sure he was not home. And it was only this year that he told me that she did that, and he had a word for it in his mind. He has a name for her in his mind, which I won't repeat, but he's good to her. He's cordial and kind, and we invite her to dinner when there's a family holiday thing. But he said he can't ever, ever be near her without his skin crawling. And I keep forgetting that. And my daughter reminded me, and I thought, this too might be sitting down there. And one of the reasons I've been so tired is I've been sitting on whatever it is, anger at her, horror at her. I don't even know how to put it into words, the sense that she, although she's,
beyond words,
she's appreciative of Tim and me because we pay her rent. And she'll say so, which is something Michael doesn't even do, but when I see her, I am so repulsed, and the repulse is part of that vulnerability thing we were talking about. It's like she, you know, by learning that about her, she has been exposed to me as a person who would do that. I don't know. Yeah, no words. I don't know what to do with it, but it's out there. I feel as if some poison has been removed from my body and it's sitting on a table right in front of me. Mm-hmm. But it's not in my body anymore.
That's awesome. And you do know exactly what to do with it. That's an old voice in your head that you don't know what to do with it. You've got the tools. You know how to use them.
I've got the tools, but I'm not sure I can. I'm not sure I'm willing to forgive this. That's what I mean. I don't know if I'm...
So you'd like to carry that toxic poison around in your body or keep it on the table longer?
No, I realize that's true because I still have the idea that I'm doing this for her. If I can think I'm doing it for me, I can do it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, remember that, you know, forgiveness has nothing to do with another person. Forgiveness does not mean I need to reconcile or I need to ever see them again. It doesn't mean any of that. It means that I remove the toxic load that burdens my structure.
Yeah. Good to remember.
And then, as you do that, you may find the space to pardon her. You may find the space for some compassion and understanding. And I could certainly, I mean, I can't fathom where my head would be. I'd certainly have some work to do if I found out that someone sexually abused my child. That would be a big one.
Yeah.
And at the same time, my mind can go to the place of, I wonder whose gene she's got there. I wonder who sexually abused her and what kind of trauma was inflicted on her that she was lashing out against. Like, was it maybe her way of getting back at you for the behaviors you did to her?
Oh, I think so. And it's and I'm not allowed, Jonathan, who told me this, said, do not tell Joe and do not tell my husband. And I have not. He doesn't want even him to know. So here I am blowing it out on the radio show, but...
work to be done.
Yeah, but it has occurred to me that she has been trying to get back at me, and I do understand that. She sure picked the most precious things in my life to undermine.
Do you suppose that with the behavior you just acknowledged that you did toward her, that you undermine some of the most precious things in her life, like her soul?
Yeah, definitely. And she doesn't even acknowledge it. She says, oh, Sue, you didn't do anything. I mean, that was nothing compared to being at school.
Yeah. Big stuff to open. Your son is 40?
50, almost 50.
50?
And I think he's turning 50 in December. Yeah, 1972. Yeah, he's December 28th, 1972.
Just a
he's
kid.
50. Just a kid, I know. He is. He's doing a lot of work, too. We have good talks. I pull out the tools undercover. You know, he does understand that his... Yes?
Go ahead.
He understands that maybe he's just beginning to consider that maybe daily anxiety is something he doesn't have to live with for the rest of his life. He said that today.
Wow, that's awesome.
Maybe I don't have to think that it is locked in because I inherited it from my dad.
Right.
And I've told him about DNA and how you can clear that, and he likes the scientific language, and I also have said, I don't have that anxiety anymore. And I had it in spades ever since I was a teenager, waking up in a near panic every day, unable to eat, going to school with great anxiety, free-floating, not necessarily nervous about any particular thing. I didn't talk to anybody about it because back then you just thought that's the way it is. That's life.
Yeah. Have you done any worksheets on that specifically?
On which?
What you just spoke about, how you, from the time being in teenager, you get up with this angst.
Well, I've gotten rid of it. Is that what you mean? Because
right,
I started doing wake-up
Yes.
sheets.
Yes. So
and I
my
told
suggestion
Jonathan,
is,
I don't have that anymore. So I said,
right.
He said, how did you get rid of it? And I said, well, I've been using Michael Ryce's tools. And I think they are the ticket. They've been the ticket for me to be well. I just don't get that feeling anymore.
Yeah.
And he said, wow.
So my suggestion would be to take it to the next level and do some worksheets on the teenager who would get up with that kind of anxiety going. And you'll probably uncover a whole different level. And my intuitive hit, and the reason I pursued this, is that this is part of why you don't sleep.
Whoa.
And when you clean that up, you'll probably sleep like a baby.
Well, I'll definitely do it because I would like to sleep like a baby.
That would be really, really awesome.
You mean you're thinking that
sure.
I just shoved it into the unconscious and it's sitting in there bothering me at night?
Yes, well, who would want to go to sleep if I know that when I wake up in the morning I'm going to have all this crap in my face? And it's going to be another horrific day. Why would I go to sleep when that's what I'm going to look at? I would say that's a pretty significant piece of your puzzle. Even though it goes back a half century or more.
Yeah.
To when you were a teenager. The other thought that comes when you're talking about Jonathan, he has shared with you directly that your sister sexually abused him?
Yeah.
So then I would open the conversation with him about another level of insight that you've had around that issue and how it's impacted you, and that, you know, if he doesn't deal with that unconscious dynamic, and that's probably a major piece of the root. I mean, the pain, the rage, the violation, the fear, the hatred, the trepidation, I mean, the list goes on with people, you know, that I've heard from who've been sexually abused. The terror. And if he just folded that away as a kid, like, what do I do with this? I can't even tell anybody. You say he just told you in the last year?
Yeah.
So what do you suppose he's been carrying around with him? And how do you suppose that's going to reflect in his perceptual mind? So I'd open the conversation with him and offer to sit down and do a worksheet with him.
Can you? My mind is going on tilt. How would we frame that out? How would I frame it out with him? I'm going to write this down because I can't imagine approaching him with that, like that. But why not?
Well, I could easily see, gee, remember, Jonathan, when you shared with me that you were sexually abused by my sister? Well, that came up for me. I've had all this stuff going on, this anxiety. I haven't been sleeping, and I had this drop in energy. And when I started to look, when I was guided to look, that's what I found in me. And since I've been looking at it and processing through it with worksheets, you know, I mean, the fact that I could hardly move for a good part of every day in the last, I don't know how long, that's been lifted. It's gone physiologically. And so that he's opened the door with you of, gee, I can now imagine that maybe I could live my life without anxiety. Jonathan, do you suppose that, and do you know what age it was that happened?
His age 4 to 6 about. It was ongoing.
So what do you suppose a child of 4 to 6 does with that kind of assault? And then the other side of it, and I've worked with, and this may be something else that opens up, I've worked with a number of people who've been sexually abused, and there was an aspect of them that enjoyed it. And then there's the guilt of, how terrible am I? So what do you suppose somebody who carries that kind of a thorn in their mind for 45 years, what do you suppose it does to them? And he could be totally free of that, totally and completely. And you could move to the next level, I would offer. This would probably be an important part of your process, where you could actually, rather than be in the unresolved trauma, whatever that looks like, being around your sister, that you could forgive, you could remove that so that you can simply remain as the presence of love in your physiology in your sister's presence.
And I haven't done that yet, for sure.
Who do you suppose suffers from that?
Oh, yeah. We hardly ever see each other. And I call her once a week and check in, but it's very superficial. You just asked me
it's time to go beyond the superficial.
Okay, you asked the question.
So my question was, what do you suppose it would be like to resolve these dynamics around your sister and stand fully present as the human being that you are, as the presence of love in the presence of your sister? And in doing that, there's going to be a whole other round of energetic dynamics, because there's a good chance that this sexual abuse issue didn't start with your sister and your son. There's a good chance that your sister very likely was sexually abused, and or there's genetic abuse that hasn't been looked at in the family system. And if that's true, and I don't know if you've ever inquired with your grandsons about what is going on in their sexuality, but I'll bet it's there.
How would it be there? What's there? You mean the
sexual abuse
experience? You mean just passed down generationally?
Generationally.
Okay.
And or been played out with those boys.
You mean their parents might have done it to them, or I'm sorry, I'm being so literal.
Their parents, or the kid down the block, or the next door neighbor, or the guy at the grocery store. I don't know.
Oh yeah. Okay.
If that energy of being abused is inside of one unresolved,
I see. Yeah.
And there's somebody in the neighborhood that has the potential to be a sexual abuser, they're going to be drawn to each other like magnets. And the issue is going to surface in some way, shape, or form. If one has forgiveness, it will surface for benefit. If one doesn't understand or have the tool of forgiveness, it'll probably be more harm, more trauma.
Could it result in confusion? Because one
absolutely.
of the grandboys seems very confused about which direction he's going, gay or straight.
Absolutely. Confusion, remember, is a mixing of unlike energies. Remember the example I've used of, we've got a whiteboard and I shine a red light and a blue light and a green light on the board, and we see red, blue, and green, unless we're colorblind and our brain interprets those frequencies differently. Scientifically, there is no such thing as red. There is no such thing as green. There is no such thing as blue. They're just different frequencies that the brain interprets in a certain way. So I have clarity on red, blue, and green when I look at the board. Even if they're all shining at once, I have clarity on them. But what happens if I pull those 3 beams in and put them on one spot on the board? Because those energies, on a physics level, because those energies are additive and subtractive with each other. The peaks and the troughs, literally, and the frequencies that are there interact and muddy the spot on the board. I don't have a red or a green or a blue spot on the board. I've got some kind of a mixed, I don't know, it's kind of like magenta or, whatever it might end up being. And that would be confusion. That's the mental equivalent of confusion. When you bring frequencies together that are not matching, then they'll interfere with each other, and that interference would look like the muddy spot on the board where the lights are shining, or it looks like the confusion in the mind. And when there's confusion, especially if there's emotional trauma attached to the confusion, my take would be that's going to be one of the first things that knocks out the spiritual faculties and knocks out the soul and knocks out choice. And then one becomes vulnerable to all kinds of crazy things in the culture. So my offering would be to really embrace the benefit of, again, we're back to that principle I spoke of earlier, everything becomes a gift when it's embraced in being. When it's embraced out of the truth of who I am. The most horrific family secret will become my blessing. That's the moment at which I can finally let go of the angel because I've gotten its gift. So there can only be benefit, especially if your son is willing to have that conversation and willing to do some work around it. I could easily see him waking up in the morning and being as free as a bird, especially after 45 years of carrying a load like that.
Yeah, well,
and that will change your sister's life as well, even if not a word is said. If he resolves that energy, if you resolve that energy, your sister's life's going to change for the better.
I'm going to stick with that thought, even though I have another thought about another source of Jonathan's anxiety, but this is one of them, I guess I would say.
Yeah,
and I was thinking
good chance it's not singular.
Oh, yeah, okay.
When you look at, if you just look back, go to your childhood and look at all of the adults in your experience, your field of experience as a kid, mom and dad's grandma and grandpa, each side, uncles, aunts on each side, cousins, just kind of survey that whole group. And how much trauma do you suppose collectively they were carrying?
Yeah.
And whatever that quantity is, how much insight and knowledge do you suppose any one of them had in how to resolve it? If they had no tools and no insight on how to resolve it, it just became trauma within the household that got passed on to the children. Like as sure as night follows day.
Yeah.
And I'm talking right down to the point where the conception of a child, if, either a man or a woman have been sexually abused, or later happily married, but have never resolved that sexual abuse, and here they are in an intimate position conceiving a child, guess what part of the starting point of that conception is for that child's form? It's that unresolved trauma resonance. And who had the tools to look at it or deal with any of it? Perhaps separate out this conversation and share it with Jonathan. I mean, you know, and I'd be delighted to support the conversation if you need some assistance with it. Because it can only benefit him, his son. You know, I don't know if he's married, his wife or former wife, whoever the mother of the child is. Who in the family system knows how to resolve any of this? Is there anybody when you were a kid that you could imagine could even have talked about it or thought about it in any healing way? That kind of an issue?
No, not at all. Right. There were no work. There was no scope for talking about anything like that.
Right. There was only the cultural message that for most people goes something like this: sex is dirty, save it for the one you love.
Right.
That's the culture.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, I wrote a poem once called Sex is Obscene. And you look at, in this culture, people will sit their child down in front of the most vile, violent movie, murder, slaughter, torture, sexual abuse, will allow them to do that. But to think about looking at a naked body? Oh my God. So the very thing that virtually, it would be unusual for a grandparent not to want grandchildren. And yet, most grandparents can't fathom that their children actually have sex. That's the insanity of sex in this culture.
Yeah.
And there's only one way to resolve it, and that's through forgiveness. Otherwise, it just, you know, I mean, look at the aberrant sexuality that's going on all around the world, all around the culture. And it's crazy. You know, I mean, there are places where people engage in certain sexual practices and they're going to be killed for it. And in this country, they're being censured for it and destroyed for it. When what needs to happen is all of the trauma and insanity. I remember having a conversation with someone around sexuality issues, and they became so distraught they actually hung up the phone in the middle of the conversation. I'm saying, wait, we're just opening a space. There's something here to do. Hung up the phone in the middle of the conversation more than once.
Wow.
Why does that happen? Because there's so much unresolved energy around those dynamics. And sooner or later, somebody has to open the conversation. Somebody has to look at the truth behind it all and start to clean it up. Because here we have people who will easily expose their children to the worst violences of the world, but would never imply to their children that they ever had sex, or would never, you know, to just think about their child actually engaging in sex is just like beyond so many people. And yet it's the most wholesome, powerful, sweet, beautiful, wonderful thing in the world.
I had a friend who had 2 daughters, and at one point she learned how you make a baby, and she comes home from school and says, "Dad," and mind you, this guy had 2 daughters. She said, "You did that twice?" It's a very funny story.
Yeah. It's funny. It would be really humorous if it weren't so sad.
Yeah.
That the child isn't brought up with just the knowledge that, gee, we have bodies for a reason, and there's a way they function, and there's a way children are brought into the world. And, excuse me, Grandma and Grandpa, if you want a grandbaby, your children are going to have to become intimately involved. And if you haven't given them a totally, completely loving perspective on that intimacy, then there's going to be trauma introduced into that child's life just through the simple act of intercourse.
Mm-hmm.
And sooner or later, somebody has to resolve the crap.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a perfect opening, and Jonathan certainly sounds like he's ready to be finished with waking up in the morning with anxiety.
Yeah, he is. He's very
What an example
curious.
you are.
Well, he's very curious about the fact that I don't have it anymore. And how did I do that? Well, I didn't do it, but I used some tools that really showed me what I was doing, and somehow I got healed in the process. And so I know he's curious.
Not somehow. It's as sure as night follows day. When you look at the goal that's involved in any trauma and you cancel it, the perceptual construct that is sourced in unresolved trauma is going to collapse into the root of that trauma. If love is present, that trauma is going to be resolved. That's all. It's so simple. I love how the Course talks about it. The Course says, it's so simple, it cannot but fail to be completely understood. Denied, yes, but not ambiguous. And if you refuse it now, it will be because in your mind the cost was too high to cancel a goal.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to hold on to this to my grave. You'll have to pry it from my cold, dead fingers. Cancel that thought. But that's how people hold on to their trauma.
Well, Jonathan often says, and Tim Bingham does too, he says, I'm anxious, but I couldn't tell you what I'm anxious about. I'm just as free-floating. It's just in there. So, you know, to establish what the goal is or goals are that are inspiring this state, it's going to be,
simple as
that's
ABC.
what I hope so.
Simple as ABC. So you tell me that you went to the grocery store and you started to walk into the grocery store and you just went into this terrible anxiety and you turned around and you got back in the car. Well, how are we going to find out what the goal was? Well, if you were walking to the grocery store and this terrible anxiety was aroused, if you were to look at or ask yourself, what would the ideal outcome here be? There's the goal. Oh, I would have loved to have just been able to, when that anxiety came up, take a gentle breath and go on to the grocery store and do my grocery shopping. Then cancel that goal. Remember that, you know, the Course talks about you've got to return your mind to the point where the trauma happened. But that's not a function of memory. You don't have to figure it out. You don't have to go through the memory bank and find the terrible, dirty, awful, horrific thing that happened to you. It's a function of forgiveness. When you engage in forgiveness, automatically, I mean, think about it as a building. So there are all these building blocks called love and wonderment and drama and trauma within the structure. A building comes up out of the structure. The building at this moment is this anxiety while walking into the grocery store. It's based on the content in the mind. All I need to do is look at the ideal outcome in that situation. I've got my goal, and when I cancel it, that structure, that perceptual construct, will collapse in on itself, and bingo, there it is. Bingo. It's that simple. It's just as simple as ABC. Now, the first time I do it, the first worksheet I do on that, I might only get one little nugget of what that's about. It might take doing 77 times 70 worksheets before I go into the full-blown memory that is accessed by forgiveness, before I've got the vitality to process through it. But it's as simple as ABC. Here I am in a circumstance. What is it? Oh, I was going up to meet the president. And all of a sudden, I had this cold sweats. Oh, what would be the ideal result for that? Oh, it would have been so good if the president just looked at me and saw how I was starting to sweat and warmly came over and embraced me. There's the goal I want to cancel. And it's a function of forgiveness to return the mind to the moment where the original trauma happened. I don't have to figure it out. I don't have to remember it. It's a pure, simple function of forgiveness. And I may go into, and it always amazes me in all the years I've been doing this with people, when they cancel the goal, where their mind goes, what they drop into. It always still amazes me. And the mind may drop into something that is not cognitive and not something I'm consciously aware of, but I energetically, standing as a space of active present love, start to process the underlying trauma till I'm finished with it. So what would the worksheet look like with Jonathan? Well, Jonathan, if you go back and remember that, I mean, you talk about how this still impacts your life. You can't be around her without this coming up. If you go back and just think about what it was like as a child to be touched inappropriately, if you could have, in your adult mind today, if you could have directed that child to say or do something, what would it have been? There's the golden candle. Say it again.
You mean establish an understandable goal for him
today,
as if he were capable of it back then? What would he have said or done?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay,
when you were 6 and she did la 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 whatever, if you'd have been able to say something or do something, if there was an outcome that would have been helpful to you, what would it have been? And it might be, geez, I wish Mom had walked in the room. It might be, I wish I could have screamed. It might be, I wish I could have, instead of freezing, because chances are, one of the things that happens with people when they go into that, they go into sympathetic dominance, and they go into freeze mode, and literally the brain shuts down. It literally is just frozen, can't do anything. A lot of times when there's sexual abuse, especially in rape cases, we heard about some of this in this recent trial that happened that was so, widely publicized. Oftentimes, the rape culture will say, well, she didn't scream, therefore it must have been okay with her. No, buddy, what happened is she went into sympathetic dominance, and one of the symptoms of sympathetic dominance is blood flow to the brain is cut off, and one goes into total, complete freeze mode, can't move, can't say a word, can't do anything. And sadly, that's oftentimes used as a defense. Well, see, that was consent. But it's actually sympathetic dominance in a freeze mode. So it might have been, the goal might have been that I could have just called out, or I could have said no, or, there could be 1,000 variations on the theme. The energy patterns are in him to come up with whatever that ideal outcome would have been.
A good question.
It might have been, geez, I wish I could have just gone and told Mom, told Dad.
Yeah.
Or it might have been, I wish I could have resolved my guilt, or my fear, or my terror. And that would be the starting point for him at 50 to start to dismantle the trauma from that event.
Wonder what it is about kids that they don't tell.
Well, oftentimes they're threatened. Oftentimes, and I'm talking from having worked with people who've been sexually abused, is they enjoyed it and would like more and are going to keep quiet. That's oftentimes a dynamic. But somebody told them how bad they were and how dirty they were, and what were all the superlatives that went along with it. And it's all, that's sown throughout the field of humanity. Men and women has been sown for centuries. And sooner or later, somebody's got to have the courage to open the pun intended, and move that trauma literally out of the genetic family heritage.
His way of dealing with it was when he learned she'd come over, he would just get out of the house.
Disappear, yeah. And that would be, my offering would be, that would be an expression of sympathetic dominance. There's the fear. And, in sympathetic dominance, most people become tongue-tied, literally, because the brain, in order to survive, blood is shunted away from the brain, and so the brain can't even function, can't even speak.
So strange, yeah.
What's happening with your breath?
I'm just in it. Just picturing that little guy.
Yeah.
It's funny, he's always been very open to me about bodily things. One time he was upset because he was traveling to England with the boys' choir, and he said, "Mom, I think there's something wrong with me. I'm not like he got back from England, they had shared rooms. He said, I'm not like the other boys." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Oh, there's something wrong with me." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Well, my shape down there is different." And I said, "Oh, Jonathan, you're not circumcised." I bet they are.
Circumcised, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I said,
That's a big deal for a lot of boys.
Yeah, he said, "You mean I'm the same as them? It's just that it's covered over with this skin?" And I said, "Yep, and there's nothing wrong with you." And he was so relieved. He was throwing his body around on the couch. He thought he was done for, but he was, let's see, he was probably 10 or 11 by then. So, but he never mentioned this.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like the opening is there with his recent speaking of that and his willingness to step out of anxiety, and your having stepped out of your anxiety, which have been with you for years, and thrown away the medication, and it's doable for everybody. I mean, there's no reason for it to be there other than there's an energy that hasn't been embraced, hasn't been dealt with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, I forget what the number of people are, but there are monstrous numbers of people who are just taking drugs every day to try and shut that off and not have to deal with it. It's a mechanical form of denial.
Mm-hmm. That it is.
To take the chemical that just shuts down that function, and of course when it shuts down that function, it just shuts down a whole lot of other functions, and they call those side effects rather than diseases. The truth is every drug is a disease disguised as a cure, period. Every drug.
Yeah.
And, one of the challenges in the healing professions is sadly, the way medicine is set up. I mean, this conversation is one that someone who's getting ready for a surgery regarding something to do with sexuality, this is a conversation the doctor should be able to have with them. But the doctor's set up for, I don't know what the numbers are, a minute and 52 seconds or something, and you got a script and you're out of the office.
Yeah.
Where's the healing in that? We need to be putting healing alongside treatment. So there's a lot of transformation that needs to be done throughout the whole culture. Because this country spends in excess of 100% more than any other country in the world on disease care. And we're something like number 38 on infant mortality, or something in the range of number 40 in maternal mortality. I forget what the number is, but it's astronomical where we are down list. We're behind, some of the countries that you would think of, they don't even qualify as third world countries, and our health outcomes are worse than theirs.
Oh, yeah.
By far. So there's, it's a huge huge thing that needs to change and happen, and it can only happen organically. So who knows? This conversation opens with Jonathan. He not only heals, but he transforms his profession. Who knows? Because this is what needs to be dealt with. And you look around and you listen to the family history of people and what has happened to them personally, and or what they know of what happened to Aunt Sally or Uncle Tom or whoever. It's a lot to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And it's time. So if you need any support, if it becomes appropriate to have that conversation, if you need any support, I'm here to support you.
Thank you so much.
You are so welcome and so deserving.
Well, thanks.
Hats off to Dr. Tim for that, your deserving comment that goes with it.
Oh, that's it, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. It is. It's sweet. It's nice to watch how people respond when you say that to them.
I know, surprised. What? Me? Yeah.
So how about a mind shifter?
Sure. I'll get out my junk right here. All right, shoot. All right.
It just triggered a whole series of thoughts for me. It's interesting in this culture that, the very topic we've been having for the last 20 or 30 minutes. And in the culture, people call that part of their bodies their junk.
Yeah. That's true.
So it's safe and healing.
Yep.
And brings only joy to my family.
Okay.
When we have honest intimate, and direct conversations.
Oh, Michael, that's an easy one.
Good. That's awesome.
I don't think I'm going to have much to refute that with. Jonathan's been great that way. Catherine, too, now that she's left that husband that set up such restrictions on her.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it sounds like just a family structure to take this whole principle to another level. You remember the idea expressed in the Course is that millions yet unborn will benefit from the work you do?
Well, that's very good.
I'm willing for this to be the opening.
Well, I hope so, and I can picture William and Charlie on Jonathan's side benefiting very much. William seems in great shape, but, there are things in everybody's life, and Charlie.
Yes. Yep. Everybody's life. Yep. We're all in this together. So we'll be breathing with you, and the clock is winding down. We'll be holding the space, and just say thank you for what you've opened today again. Your inquiry is awesome. Thanks for having the courage, and everybody.
I wasn't even going to talk on the show.
Say it again?
Jeanie pushed I wasn't even going to talk on the show. She said, your hand was up during Tim. Is it still up? She says. And, of course, as soon as Jeanie invites me to talk, I'm off and running, and you do the rest.
Let's go for it. There you go. Sweet. Awesome. Well, you're appreciated, and everybody have the best year yet of your eternal life. It is an awesome gift to give the world, and the world is in need of it. Blessings.